For 5 long years, two of the world's biggest powers, India and China, have basically been in a deep freeze, a really tense, dangerous standoff. But in the summer of 2025, something quietly started to change. So today, we're going to break down this very cautious thaw.
Okay, so to really get what's happening now, we need to rewind a bit. This whole deep freeze kicked off back in 2020. There were deadly clashes along their disputed border, the line of actual control, and that just slammed the door on any real diplomacy. For years, it was nothing but military tension. Then, boom, August 2025. A few high-level meetings happen, and suddenly there's a flicker of hope for something like normal.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? The one we're going to try to answer in this explainer. Is this for real? Is this a genuine reset between these two global giants, or are we just watching a temporary timeout in what's actually a much longer rivalry? Let's dig into the evidence.
So how did this thaw even begin? Well, it didn't start on the border with the soldiers. It actually started behind closed doors. The first major shift was a diplomatic breakthrough, finally reopening those lines of communication that had been silent for years. This was the moment. China's foreign minister visiting New Delhi. Now, this was way more than just another meeting. After years of basically radio silence and finger-pointing, this was the first concrete deliverable, a clear sign from both capitals that they were finally ready to start talking seriously again. This is what broke the diplomatic ice.
And look, this wasn't just a photo op. They actually came away with some tangible agreements. We're talking about new communications channels for the border, resuming direct flights, and even moves to revive trade and help with religious pilgrimages. These are real, practical steps. They're all designed to de-risk this incredibly tense relationship.
All right, so the diplomatic picture is looking a little brighter. But the real heart of this whole conflict has always been the border itself. And when you look at the reality on the ground there, well, things get a lot more complicated.
You can really see the shift in strategy when you compare then versus now. Back in 2020, it was all about deadly clashes, forward deployments, a complete communication breakdown. Today, the goal isn't really to solve the conflict, it's to manage the risk of another one. So they've pulled back from the big hotspots and set up new military hotlines. The whole game is about prevention now.
But, and this is a huge but, here's the reality check. For all the positive talk, both India and China have more troops, more weapons, and more roads and runways along that border than they did before the 2020 crisis even started. So yeah, they may be talking more, but they are absolutely preparing more.
And this right here gets to the core problem, the big gap between their strategies. For India, everything, and I mean everything, comes back to the border. Their position is non-negotiable. There can be no real progress on trade or investment or anything else until there's lasting peace and a full de-escalation of troops. Period.
Now, away from the border, the other major battleground in this relationship is the economy. And what we see here is a very familiar pattern. A couple of positive steps forward, but they're completely overshadowed by a massive structural problem that just won't go away.
On the surface, you've got some good news. China has eased up on export restrictions for some really critical stuff India needs, like rare earth magnets. And like we said, they're planning to reopen some border trade routes and get flights going again, which obviously helps business.
But then, there's this number. Over $100 billion. What is that? Well, that is the enormous, jaw-dropping trade deficit that India has with China every single year.
And look, this isn't just a bad year for exports, it's what's called a structural imbalance. It means that year after year, India consistently buys way more from China than it sells to them. And that creates this huge economic and political friction that a few small deals here and there just can't fix. So what do we have? We've got some real diplomatic progress on one hand, but we've got these huge military and economic challenges that are still very much there on the other. So where does this all go? What are the signs we should be looking for?
You can really think of the whole situation as a scorecard with two columns. In the improved column, you've got real positives. High-level contact is back, they've got new rules to prevent border clashes, but then you look at the not fixed column and the problems are just deeper. We're talking huge troop levels, a total lack of trust, and that massive trade imbalance. The small wins just haven't tackled the big problems, at least not yet.
So as you watch this all unfold, here are 4 key things to keep an eye on. Number 1, will meetings between the top leaders, Modi and Xi, actually lead to troops pulling back? 2, will those agreements from August on flights and trade actually happen?
3. On trade, will China ease up more, and will India open its markets in return? And finally, the wild card, the U.S. factor. How will American policies influence this whole delicate dance?
Which brings us right back to our central question, doesn't it? Are we watching a true reset in Asia's most important and most complicated relationship? Or is this just a tactical pause, a brief intermission in what is fundamentally a long-term strategic rivalry? For now, the answer really depends on which one of those columns on the scorecard you think matters more.